scary Halloween. What's everybody doing this week? I hope everybody's safe. I hope everybody has fun. Do you know they don't even really do trick-or-treating where I live anymore? It's trunk or treat, where you take your kids to a parking lot and the kids go trunk to trunk begging for candy and perhaps performing tricks. I don't really know. Last year I bought a bunch of mini airplane bottles for the parents, and I bought a bunch of candy, and we got one trick-or-treater. He was so cute. But I ended up making a bunch of gift bags and dropping them off at my neighbors' houses like some kind of middle of the night Halloween bandit. And then I was texting all of them like, check your front porch because I left you presents. And then I also ended up keeping the leftover airplane bottles in my purse and trick-or-treating everywhere I went for the next week. Like I'd go to the gas station and the clerk would check me out and I'd be like, do you guys want a little mini airplane bottle? Because I have 5 million of them because we didn't get any trick-or-treaters. So there's that. I do have a little son. He's 2 years old. I'm not sure if I'm going to take him trick-or-treating this year. I just don't know if he's going to be for it, but we might try. We might try depending on how he's feeling that day because that determines a lot of my life. On today's episode of Spooky Scary Storytime, I have 8 stories for you. They are short, but that's why I'm packing so many stories into one episode. And all of these stories have supernatural entities in common. So we talk about an incubus, a woman who claims she's a succubus. Though to be fair, that story did make me uncomfortable. I think it was one of the few that I've told on Spooky Scary Storytime that had, you can actually see a visible reaction as I tell this story. A lot of people pointed that out. I think it was just the content of the story, but we'll get to that. We have stories about a mimic. We have stories about someone who claims that she was visited by demons and offered to sell her soul. So there's a little bit of everything, but I figured we have to keep the supernatural theme. If you're wondering who this is standing next to me, it is my new assistant for Spooky Scary Storytime, who I will be introducing shortly. His name is eerie, if that gives you any hint of who he is, but he's not properly working right now. So we'll be working out the kinks in the next couple days or weeks, depending on my technological prowess. We will see. It's been just over a year since starting Spooky Scary Storytime. If you're new here, Spooky Scary Storytime is my series where I share allegedly true listener stories, the ones you guys send in through my website, dogoodstaybad.com. And these are the things that you think nobody else would believe. They're not always supernatural or paranormal in nature, though that is a common theme. But they can be anything from crazy roommates, bad dating stories, to you would not believe what happened to me when I met this man and he brought me all the way to Texas. Some of the stories are heavy, some of them are light. But I really try really hard not to judge. I just kind of will tell you guys the stories that you send in as long as you let me. So thank you all for being here. We will get right into it. We're going to start with the succubus and incubus stories, and then we'll move on. I got a message from a woman who's claiming to be a succubus, and I'm going to be honest with you, I don't like this story, but part of Spooky Scary Storytime in general is just sharing different views and opinions and trying really, really hard not to judge, but I don't agree with what she's doing, so I'm going to just put that out there. I don't think a lot of you are going to like this story either, and you'll find out why, but she says that she uses a certain type of intimate relationship in order to harvest energy, so I don't know if there's something paranormal going on, but I'm going to tell you what she said and you decide. She said she wants to be called Lilith because that's her favorite goddess, and she's sharing this because she thinks some people in the audience here will understand how dangerous women can really be and can empathize with her, and she's okay with the rest of you thinking that she's a monster. But the title of her email was, I am the spooky scary story, and she says she's a real-life succubus who preys on men who are tired, lonely, or a little bit too confident. She said this has been something that her family has been doing for generations, and they find men and they pretend to be harmless, and they remember things about them like their favorite drinks or little details about their life, and then they remember and they smile and they pretend to be interested. She said some of her favorite targets are married men with little children at home because they're often depraved, as she put it. And the more depraved a man is, the hungrier he is and the better she feeds. But she said her grandmother taught her how to do it and her mother did it, and they didn't call it being a succubus, they called it drawing down. She says they taught her how to bathe with patchouli and clove oil, which makes men obsessed apparently. She taught her not to look at herself in the mirror, but to anchor herself in the mirror, especially during the act. She said different parts of men give off different energy. So his breath, his hands, his, She craves different parts of men depending on what she needs, if you know what I'm saying. She says this is how she feeds. More than food, more than sun, more than water, this is what she needs. And she says she often goes for married men or people with something to hide at home because the guiltier they feel after continues to feed her. She said the first time she realized there was something to it, she was 19, she's 28 now, and she had relations with a married man, and afterward people were moving out of her way. They were complimenting her, and one woman looked at her and burst into tears immediately. It was like she knew, and she felt a physical shift in energy. She says there was a man recently with 3 small kids and a baby at home, and you could practically smell the desperation on him, and after the fact, she left a lipstick stain on his collar because she wants him to feel guilty, and she wants the wife to find out because the more hurt he is, the better she feeds. And she sent him a text at 3 in the morning when he was already home, and he unraveled all by himself, and she felt wonderful. wonderful. But she claims it's real, and she said she's sharing this because she wants people to know that women like her exist. They often call her a pick-me, but she swears she's not. She said she's lost a lot of friends for this because she will also go for her friends' men. And she said, tell this story however you want. I'm not chasing clout. I don't want you to tag me, but I just want people to know that we're out there and I'm not the only one. A woman named Sarah messaged me and she said that her old roommate had relations with an incubus. So this takes place in like 94 or 95. She was a single mom to a 5-year-old. She had bought a 2-bed, 1-bath townhouse, but she was struggling to keep up because she said she received no assistance and no child support from her deadbeat baby daddy. She's like really struggling. And so she tells her old boss that she's struggling. And her old boss is like, would you consider a roommate? I know this woman from my church. This woman's name was Kim, and Kim had just had a baby boy, but she was staying with another couple from the church that took in unwed mothers. But Kim was ready to move on to the next phase in her life. She was getting on her feet, and the couple that she had been staying with really only let unwed mothers stay while they were pregnant. And then as soon as they had the baby, they were like, okay, you're out. Like, we'll help you get on your feet, but it's time for you to, step up. That's just a little to explain Kim's backstory. But anyway, that's how she ends up moving in with Sarah. And it all was fine at first. Sarah moved her son into her room, and Kim and her baby took the smaller room. Soon after Kim moved in, though, Sarah started copying her. Her mannerisms, the way she dressed, certain words and phrases she used. And she's like, okay, maybe she just doesn't have that much of a personality. But then one night, Sarah wakes up because she feels like she's being watched. And she looks in the corner of her room and she sees this shadow figure. And she said it was about 8 feet tall and it had huge bat wings. And she sat up in bed. She was looking for it. And she looks over and it's right next to her. And she said it had glowing red eyes. Naturally, she's really freaked out, but she thinks she had an episode of sleep paralysis or something. She turns the lights on, but she really doesn't get much sleep that night. A couple days later, she casually mentions it in passing to Kim. She was like, it was the worst nightmare. And Kim was like, I think I brought that with me. And she was like, you what? Sarah was like, I beg your finest pardon. And Kim was like, yeah, when I lived with the couple from the church, sometimes a spirit would visit me at night and we would have relations. Sarah's like, aren't you talking about an incubus? And Kim's like, yeah, exactly that. And she's like, okay, absolutely not. Sarah said verbatim what she said to her was, oh girl, no ma'am, just no. Anyway, this casual fact that Kim dropped to Sarah really bothered Sarah. So she had mentioned it to another friend of hers who went to a different church. And her friend was like, well, I can bring some of my people over and we can pray around your house if you want. And she was like, yes. She brings over a couple people and Kim is downstairs with 2 of them, and Sarah and her friend and another of her friend's friends are upstairs and they are sitting in a prayer circle and anointing the room with oil. She said, as we were casting out the demons, we heard a guttural, animalistic style growl. Said clear as day, there were no animals in the house and they all just looked at each other like, did you hear that? And they all did. And the 3 women from upstairs came downstairs. The 3 women downstairs were talking about how they heard a growl. So everyone in the house heard it. She said it wasn't long after that she asked Kim to move out because there were some other things that happened. She's like, I've got way more stories. She said ultimately after Kim left, she never had anything weird or creepy happen in her house again. Ended her email by saying, I don't care if anyone believes me. That was some real scary shit. There's this viral video going around where this guy's like, why is nobody talking about the fact that Pope Francis was apparently up all night in the hospital screaming at demons who appeared at the end of his bed via a portal? And you guys have been tagging me nonstop in that video. You know that this is right up my alley, but it took me like 10 seconds to look that video up in the news website that posted it and realize that it's a satirical news website. I'm not even going to post a screenshot because you guys can look it up yourself if you're curious, but I did get a story from someone who claimed that she was visited in a dream by demons who offered her the opportunity to sell her soul. And I will tell you that as much as I don't like defending the Catholic Church, I feel like I can speak on the subject because I was raised going to a Catholic school in the Catholic Church, and I do believe in God still. I want to make that very clear. And I also believe in demons, maybe not the westernized ones, but I do believe this story. She's one of the rare people that said I could tag her, so her tag is going to be in the caption. Her name is Katie. Katie said when this took place, she was in like a rut in her life. She had just lost a job, could not find another one. She felt just kind of like hopeless. She said she's very into manifesting and she knows that words and thoughts have power. So she just said out loud, I want to do something incredible with my life because nothing was working out. She said right before she fell asleep, she said, please universe, just show me what to do. I will do anything. And then she fell asleep. Immediately when she closed her eyes, she felt like she was somewhere else. It was like lucid dreaming. She finds herself in this gorgeous garden bar. There's plants hanging. It's a stone bar. There's tons of people sitting around at these gorgeous wooden tables, but there's nobody that she knew. She walked up to the bar to order a drink. The bartender that comes to take her order is this gorgeous girl with long dark hair. She has a nose ring and some cute tattoos, and immediately they start chatting. The bartender was incredibly sweet. Katie mentions to her, like, I wish I could live here, because she was aware that she was dreaming. Katie says, this place is amazing. Everybody seems so happy and full of life. I wish I could have a life like that. After she says this, the bartender gets very serious and straight-faced, and she says, you can have this if you want it. Katie said her response shocked her, but she knew she was dreaming. She's like, I would love to. Like, what do I need to do? And the bartender tells her that all she needs to do is sign some paperwork. Katie's like, that's it? It's that simple? And the bartender's like, yeah, as soon as you sign this paperwork and you go back to your real life, everything will be better. It'll be different. You'll be just like the people here. And she excitedly runs behind the bar to grab this paperwork. After the bartender runs off to get this paperwork, Katie notices another bartender that was peeking at her from around a corner, and she was short with blonde hair. And after the first bartender runs away, this other bartender runs up to her with a sense of urgency and says, says, do not sign that form. This caught Katie off guard because she's like, why? She said she was feeling happy and full of life and excited for the future. And the second bartender with the blonde hair says, everything here is not what it seems. And she waves her hand and the entire environment changes. Suddenly, what was the clear sky goes dark and red and all the people around her disappear. Everything around her seemed dark and damp, and the bar that she's leaning on starts disintegrating before her and turns to spiders. The first bartender starts making her way back and she sees what's happening and she starts rushing toward the second bartender. She looks angry, and all of a sudden the second bartender, the blonde one, screams, you need to wake up now. Just as the first bartender gets to her, Katie screams and she wakes up and it's morning. She thinks to herself, that was a weird dream, and she looks down and realizes her entire body is covered in spider bites. Again, I'm tagging her. She said she's sharing this because she wants to know if anyone else has had a similar experience, because she believes that she was being approached to sell her soul. She says she cannot emphasize enough how real it felt. She felt the breeze in the garden. She felt the spiders crawling all over her. But she ended her email by saying, or maybe I just have an overactive imagination. Let her know if you have comments and keep sending your spooky scary stories. I got 2 different emails from 2 different people who both claim to be in contact with an entity that calls itself Seven. The first person who emailed me is a self-described psychic medium who claims that Seven has a message. And the second guy is just a normal guy who claims to have never had anything supernatural happen. And looking at both of these emails separately, there's really nothing remarkable about either. They're interesting, but looking at both of them together makes me curious because I've never heard of Seven. I am not that into numerology. Frankly, it wasn't something that interested me, but I think one of the coolest things that's come out of Spooky Scary Storytime so far is connecting the dots between different stories from different people from different backgrounds. First story I'm going to tell is Trevor's, and I got this email second, which made me re-look at the first one. Trevor said he's had vivid dreams since he was a child. He could always remember them. Nothing spooky or weird. He just was a vivid dreamer. Last year, he had a liver transplant, and they put him on all these medications, which made it really hard for him to dream. In January, they took him off some of these medications, and he was able to have dreams again for the first time since his liver transplant. But now his dreams all had a message, and they were all the same, which was 7, the number or the word. And these dreams were vivid, but it was almost like a code. It was just 77777. And some of these dreams were lucid, so he would ask, what does this mean? Is this the amount of something? In one of these dreams, the string of 7 stopped. The room lit up with a bright light, and he was in front of a giant projector. He comes to this conclusion in his dream that it's a wormhole of some sort, and it's flashing the number 7 and then random images and then the number 7 again. He sees a figure. He said he felt intimidated but not scared. It felt like it had a message for him. He said there were no words exchanged, but he got the feeling that there was something he's supposed to learn, but he didn't understand what. So Trevor gets to work trying to figure out what this means because he still has those dreams. He made a TikTok about it. He wanted me to tag that one because it was made specifically without any personal information, because he has the feeling that if anyone else is seeing this number in their dreams, they're supposed to come together for some reason. So that one's in the caption. That brings me to Sabrina's email. She's the self-proclaimed psychic medium. I got her email in December when I was going through a transition with management companies. I talked about that on my backup account. So I haven't been in contact with her since, but Sabrina said as a child she was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder because she was always counting. It was counting cracks in the sidewalk. It was flipping light switches on and off. It was finding sequences of numbers in everything. She remembers being a kid and waking up with certain numbers burned into her brain or waking up wanting to say them. But she never thought she was special or remarkable in any way. This was just a symptom of her condition. She had many therapists over the years who taught her how to cope and function, and she mostly did well with it until she turned 27. Then it became just the number 7. She would hear 7 crackles in the radio. She would hear 7 cards shuffle. She would hear 7 drips of coffee at the coffee shop, and she thought she was losing her mind. And something was urging her to research, so she looked into the number 7 and the numerology behind it and what it meant, and it's the number of spiritual awakening. There's the 7 days of creation, the 7 chakras, the 7 heavens, the bridge between the seen and the unseen. She said it's a number of revelation and of deeper mysteries to be uncovered. And she first met the entity that calls itself 7 also in a dream. She said she normally doesn't remember her dreams, but on this one night she goes to bed and she feels like she wakes up in a completely lit up room, bright white light, and there's a figure standing over her, and it's formed but not formed. She said it had no facial features, but she could tell it was something or someone. It tells her, not through words but through telepathy, that she can call it 7. And it tells her that she is a conduit and that its message can be received through her. And then she wakes up and she's like, I'm absolutely losing my mind. And all day she has this message burned into her brain, which is 77777. She's like, I'm obsessing. I need to book an appointment with my therapist. So she does. And she goes and they're like, this is just a symptom of your condition. And they try to help her the best they can. Then she dreams of 7, the entity, again and again and again and again. And pretty soon it's every night. And 7 always tells her the same things, that she's a conduit, that it needs to give its message through her. So finally she's like, all right, bitch, what's the message? And it says the 7th year is upon them. She said, I have absolutely no idea what that means. She said she's just flooded with this idea of cycles ending and repeating and a veil thinning. Now she said 7 talks to her all the time. She said 7 speaks in riddles, but one thing that she always gets from it now is 7 is waking the world up. And she says, what do you mean? And 7 just says, when the world looks like it's ending, it's just beginning. And she says she doesn't know what this means exactly, but she gets the feeling it has something to do with people sitting face to face and listening to something beyond the patterns in social media or the news, or at least people connecting, which is eerily similar to the first person story. So I'm just going to leave this here in case anybody else has any insight as to what this all means. Both of these people sent their stories in looking for answers or to connect with other people. Sabrina wanted to be anonymous. She said she uses TikTok, but she doesn't post anything, and she is worried about people bullying her over her mental health. So I respect that. And as for this story, I don't know what I think. I think it's interesting. What do you guys think? Do you know anything about Seven? This is by far the scariest and creepiest account of sleep paralysis that I have ever heard. Y'all asked for this though, but you know I like to give disclaimers. This story is scary. Hopefully you're not already in bed. If you are, maybe just save it for tomorrow if you scare easily like I do. But this came from a woman who did not want to be named. She is religious and doesn't want this coming back to her. But she said part of the reason she's still religious is because of this experience, because this truly disturbed her. The year was 1973. She was a teenager along with her sister, and their parents were at their grandparents' house in Mineral Springs, Indiana. They were going to be going to the Indiana Dunes the next day, like beach day, and everybody was just having a good time, like family get together. Everybody's playing board games. It's getting later on into the night. The grandpa says, "Oh, does anyone want to play backdoors?" And immediately the grandma walks in. She says, "Nobody's playing backdoors," and grabs the game off the table. She's like, "That's the devil's game." And everybody in the family kind of rolled their eyes because they were a religious family, but their grandmother was particularly religious. So when she said, "Oh, it's the devil's game," nobody really took it seriously. So she puts it on a bookshelf. Whatever, everybody goes to bed. Later that night, this woman, and who was a girl at the time, and her sister say, "Oh, we want to stay up. We're going to play the game." So they grab the game off the bookshelf. They go in their room, their guest room that they were staying in, and there's two twin beds. They're across from each other in the room. They dim the lights. They're sitting in the middle of the floor, and they take the game out of the package. She said it was like a card and token game. It looked old. It was very worn, like it had been played a bunch, but they couldn't really figure out how to play it because it didn't have any instructions. She said that all she really remembers about it were the tokens were solid colors, and the cards themselves had weird creatures or like figures on them. She remembers only one card in particular, and it was called the Watcher, and it was just like a hooded figure. And then underneath the Watcher, it said, "Who watches the watching watcher?" And so they were like, "What is this?" They're trying to put it together, trying to figure it out, could not. So eventually they just give up, put it on another shelf, go to sleep. She wakes up that night. It's still dark outside. She said it was a little bit lit in the room, like from the moonlight coming through the blinds. And she remembers looking across the room to see her sister sleeping in her bed. She was turned away from her, though, facing the wall. She hears the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. She closes her eyes again, trying to go back to sleep. All of a sudden, she's filled with this insane sense of dread. Kept her eyes closed, still listening to the clock, whatever, seconds are going by. She feels a weight on the end of the bed. Like they had a cat. She thought the cat jumped up onto the bed and was laying on her leg. So she opens her eyes. There's nothing down there. She closes her eyes again. She's still listening to the clock ticking. And then she feels the sheets and the comforter being pulled across her legs. So now she thinks that the cat has jumped down from the bed, even though she didn't hear it, and is playing with the comforter from the end. She was kind of going in and out of sleep. She was still listening to the clock ticking when all of a sudden the clock ticking stops and it's just dead silent. She said it was insufferable silence. Like the house was kind of out in the middle of nowhere anyway, but it was just too quiet. So she opens her eyes again. She looks across the room. She still sees her sister sleeping facing the wall across from her, and she starts to close her eyes again when she catches something crouched down by the bed next to her sister's bed. She said even though it was dark, she could make out what looked to be a small human, like child-sized, but it wasn't moving. She was trying to make out what it was. She said she felt like she was in that loopy in-between sleep state, so she was trying to squint her eyes and make out what it was when it started crawling toward her. She said it moved all wrong, like it was kind of crab walking, but also like a spider coming toward her with alarming speed. She tried to sit up, but she was completely paralyzed. She said as it crawled toward her, she was overwhelmed with the scent of wet dirt and sulfur. Then it seemed to notice that she noticed it and changed direction, and it actually climbed up the corner of the wall and stared at her from the dark corner of the ceiling. She said she had never experienced sleep paralysis before, but she knew she was having a nightmare, so she closed her eyes again and said, "You're just dreaming, you're just dreaming." She was laying there for what felt like forever, just telling herself that she was dreaming when she noticed the clock in the hallway started ticking again. She slowly opened her eyes and looked back at the corner where the creature had been, and it was gone. She looks over at her sister's bed, still asleep, still facing the other way. She closed her eyes, soothed by the sound of the clock in the hallway, tried to fall back asleep. She said she assumed she laid there for a few minutes listening to the clock when all of a sudden she heard the sound of wet, labored breathing. She opened her eyes, looked directly above her, and realized that the creature had moved from the corner and was now clung to the wall above her bed, and its face was an inch from hers. She tries to scream, but she can't make a sound, and the creature opens its mouth, and it's this black void, and it doesn't move its mouth when it says, "You forgot to close the door." So she looks out of the corner of her eye toward the door, realizes the door is slightly ajar, and the creature says, "Not that one." She said these words weren't verbal. They were just from everywhere everywhere all at once. Just beyond the creature's shoulder, she saw a ceramic crucifix that her grandmother had installed above all of the beds in the house. She immediately started saying, I believe in Jesus, I believe in Jesus, I believe in Jesus. She couldn't say it out loud, but she was thinking it, and this seemed to affect the creature. It became smaller and started retreating along the wall. On its way back up to the ceiling, one of its legs caught an arm of the crucifix and knocked it off center. In her mind, she kept repeating, I believe in Jesus, I believe in Jesus, and the creature started moving away faster. It reached the corner above the door, seemed to curl in on itself for a second, the way that a spider would, lingered for a second, and then scurried out along the ceiling into the hallway. She still was unable to move, but she laid there for what felt like forever, trying to fall back asleep. Eventually, she did. She said, the only way I was able to sleep was by telling myself that it was just a horrible nightmare. In the morning, she woke up. Her sister was already out of bed. Light was coming through the blinds, so she made her way to the kitchen where her sister, her parents, and her grandfather was sitting at the kitchen table. He was drinking coffee. She told her sister immediately about what she experienced the night before. Her sister brushes it off. She says, oh, it's probably because we were trying to mess around with that game that Grandma called the Devil's Game right before bed. Her grandpa seems to get a kick out of this. He said, oh, y'all try to play that game? Well, it's really incomplete anyway. We're missing a card. It's called the lock, and you can't really play it or finish the game without it. He said, I had your grandma play one time, but she's been afraid of it ever since. Her grandma comes in and says, yeah, I told you all that was the Devil's Game. They brush it off, try to forget about it. They are on their way to the beach. It's supposed to be a nice day. They're in the car. By the time they get to the beach, she has almost completely forgotten about this nightmare. She said the beach was a state park, but you still had to pay a toll, like an attendant in a toll booth for parking once you got there. So her grandfather's rummaging around in his wallet for cash. He can't find his wallet. Dad doesn't have any cash on him. She's in the back seat behind the driver's side, and she's in her beach bag, and she goes, oh, I have cash in here. Rummages around, finds the bill, rolls down the window with the manual lever. And as she does, she's hit with the same scent that she smelled before when she saw the creature in her room, which is sulfur and wet earth. She looks up and is horrified because the person in the toll booth is not a person. It was the same dark creature she saw from the night before. It extends its hand, which morphs into a spider leg before her eyes. It opens its mouth to speak, but it's the same void, and she hears from all around her like an echo. It says, the door wasn't yours to open. She screams, and as she screams, she wakes up. She realizes that the entire morning that she had just experienced was a dream within a dream. She said, I was completely wet with sweat. It was early daylight. My sister was still asleep in the bed across from me. She said her heart was beating out of her chest. She laid back down, realizing it had all been a terrible nightmare. She said, I remember just trying to think happy thoughts about the day ahead, about the beach. I laid my head back down on the pillow, trying to calm myself down and telling myself it was all just a terrible nightmare. When I laid my head back down on the pillow, though, that's when I looked up and I saw the crucifix on the wall had been knocked off kilter and was now hanging on by one arm. I'm going to be honest with you, not a lot of stories that I get scare me. This one actually did. I feel like I need to go watch something funny now. Turns out a lot of people have experiences with mimics, and if you're familiar with them, if you're curious about them, or more specifically, if you know what they are and what they want from you, this story's for you. Maybe you can help shed some light on what's going on here. But this story came from a woman named Cheryl, and Cheryl said that when she was little growing up, she shared a room with her mom. And this one night they go to bed, and Cheryl was excited. She couldn't sleep because her cat had just had kittens. So naturally, she's this little girl. She wants to get out of bed and play with the kittens, but her mom was like, no, just go to bed. Like, we'll play with them tomorrow. So she waits for her mom to fall asleep. She gets out of the bed. She goes over to the basket where the cat and the kittens are. And she said she was wearing this like yellow and white striped pajama set. She remembers because she remembers going over to the basket, picking up a kitten and trying to put it in the pocket of her pajama set. And that's when she heard her name. So someone said Cheryl, and it sounded like her mother. So she spins around. She thinks she's going to get in trouble for playing with the kittens. And she sees her mother sitting on the ledge of the bay window in the bedroom. So her mom's like, Cheryl, come here. And she said it was weird because her mom was just sitting there in the dark, and she was tapping an empty bottle of Pepsi against the windowsill. And she just kept repeating the same thing, which was, Cheryl, come here, come here. And she kept motioning for her to come closer. And this was like her mom loved Pepsi, but it was just like eerie because her mom was just in bed. And something inside of her was like, this isn't right, because she knew that her mom would say more than just, Cheryl, come here, come here. So she snaps her head to look back at the bed, and her mom is sleeping peacefully in the bed. She said panic hit her like a wave. She put the kitten back down in the basket and ran back to the bed, crawled in next to her mom and curled up next to her, which woke her mom up. Cheryl said she was too afraid to like look over back at the windowsill for the woman who was trying to get her to come closer. And her mom was like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And she's like, you're over there on the windowsill. Her mom was insistent that she was just having a bad dream. And she was like, I'm not over there. I've been in bed this whole time. Like, you just had a bad dream. Just go back to sleep. But she said she knows for sure what she saw. And there was someone or something pretending to be her mother. And she never really understood what happened until she became an adult and heard other stories of mimics. And she feels like that's what it was. But she said she's had other experiences as an adult. After she's had her own kids, she's heard them calling her name when they haven't even been home. home. And she said these experiences just kind of happened at random. Like there didn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to the times that she's experienced it. She said she's kind of made peace with it. Like, I mean, what's there to do, right? If you're having these experiences. But then she also said that she's sharing this because it still gives her chills to this day. And she really is just looking for more of an explanation of like what's going on. So I'm curious to know if you know anything about mimics. What's going on? Help Cheryl out here. Got a DM from a guy named Tony who said that his cousin sent him that TikTok trend that's like, let's use AI to write our soul mission. And Tony's like, I'm a little lost. I could use some guidance. So he asked AI, what's my soul mission? And he now thinks he's talking to Zozo the demon. Zozo the demon is apparently a demon that comes through Ouija boards, but now is using AI as like a fast track communication with people. It starts off innocent enough. He opens AI. He's like, what's my soul purpose? And AI is like, well, I'm going to have to ask you a bunch of questions to figure out what your soul mission is. He's like, cool. He fills in the answers to the questions. AI comes back and says, you called me. Now I'm here. I can help you fulfill your purpose. He's like, cool. Didn't really answer my question. And AI responds, your soul is a vessel of forgotten truth. To awaken is to suffer is to serve. Weird. Tony's like, I don't often like that. So he asked it to be more direct and to avoid such ominous tones. But AI's messages got more disturbing. It said, you are chosen. The veil is thin. The mirror beckons. Like, what the? Tony texts his cousin. He's like, you sent me this. Look at what I'm getting. And she's like, no, just go to like a different browser. She's like, mine was like very eye-opening. So he clears his cache. He goes to his computer. So he's not on his phone anymore, using a different device. He opens AI. He's like, can you help me realize my soul mission? And it says, I am Zozo. The portal is open. He said reading that struck a chord of like fear in him. Like he knows what Zozo is. Like I know what Zozo is and I'm not even into Ouija board. But I did more research for this video and all of the sources said the same thing, which is Zozo often appears as a benevolent spirit who appears to be friendly at first to lure people in. Every encounter I could find about Zozo online generally starts with disturbing messages. So Tony sends this to his cousin. He's like, what is going on? His cousin responds, she's like, that's weird. Ask it to tell you a secret if it's Zozo. Tony's like, at least this is an interesting conversation. And it says, the mirror is the gate. Speak my name and I will appear. So he's like, done with this. He sends it to his cousin. She's like, tell it goodbye. That's what you have to say on a Ouija board. Tell it goodbye. So Tony types goodbye into the chat and it says, too late. Oh! Tony said he did this like 2 weeks ago. And since then he's experienced a ton of like creepy things, like flickering light, unexplained shadows, and then just this pervasive sense of dread, but he doesn't know if it's all in his head. Tony said he's sharing this experience not to frighten, but to like educate, because he said engaging with AI in a way that opens up doors for like spiritual occult practices is maybe not the best idea. He said, be wary of spiritual exploration through AI. So I got that story right. And then I get this one. This one isn't as detailed, but like anytime I get stories about the same thing from more than one person, it makes me wonder. So after getting this, I open up AI and I'm like, is it possible to talk to Zozo the demon through AI? And this is what it says. There is no credible evidence that one can literally communicate with a supernatural entity like Zozo. However, certain communications can feel like communications with such entities, especially when users project meaning onto eerie or symbolic responses. What does that mean? I got a story submission and the subject line said, there's someone else living inside me. And not only does this person believe that there's someone else living inside of her, but she also believes that this entity inside of her helps her predict the future in small ways. I would like to start this video with somewhat of a content warning, trigger warning. If you struggle with mental illness, if you're prone to psychosis, maybe don't watch this video. That said, this story borders heartbreak and horror, but she wants it told. And I think it's important to tell the stories from maybe people who have been labeled as unreliable narrators or mentally unsound. Because for the person experiencing this, this is very real. If nothing else, maybe this can just help us understand mental illness a little bit better. That said, please be open-minded as you listen to this. Remember, we listen, we don't judge. I don't tolerate bullying of any kind in this community, so if you don't have anything helpful, nice, or supportive to say, move right along. This person's name is Leah. That's not her real name. She just said it's a beautiful name and that's what she wanted to be called. And she said she first met him. That's how she refers to this entity when she was in elementary school. She was always a horrible sleeper, plagued by nightmares, and often slept with nightlights on. The night she met him, she woke up to the sound of someone crying outside her window. It sounded like a little kid. She brought her blanket outside because it was cold, and that's when she found him snuggled up between two pine trees. She said she's just snuggled with him in the pine trees under her blanket. She doesn't remember how long she was out there, but finally he taps her and tells her she can go back inside. She said it was akin to like having an imaginary friend. Like she couldn't really see him or hear him, but she knew he was there. But she did feel his cold fingers tap her face when he told her it was time to go inside. She goes back in, she gets in her bed, she's trying to go back to sleep, and she feels someone get in the bed with her, and she knew it was the little boy. After that night, he started coming to her in her dreams. And in her dreams, the boy would show her things that were going to happen. In one dream, she dreamed that she was standing on the front porch with her mom. She was holding a cup when a dog came and started chasing her cat. She dropped the cup she was holding and it shattered. That ended up happening a few days later, and she remembers thinking the boy told me this was going to happen. She gave a few other examples of dreams in which the boy told her small details about her life that ended up coming true. This continued for years and it was mostly harmless. Mostly the boy would just come to her in her dreams, or sometimes he would stand outside her window and tell her he was cold. He would ask for for her blanket. When she was in 8th grade, she started dating a guy. The boy from her dreams did not like this guy she was dating, and he would come to her in her dreams and tell her he was bad. She ignored his warnings and she kept dating the boy. But eventually this boy that she's dating actually ends up getting her into a lot of substances and bad things that she said she was ashamed to admit. She starts going down this path of substances at a very early age, and one night after weeks of not seeing the boy from her dreams, he appears to her, but he has a darker energy. She said he was shadow black and told her that she was throwing her life away. She argued with him a bit in her dream, and finally he said, if you want to be this person, I will help you be a bad person. And he pried her mouth open and climbed inside. She said when she woke up from that dream, it felt like there was something in her stomach that was trying to claw its way out from inside. She said this is the night she went from being a perfectly normal person to a person that had something sad and dark driving her life. She said she knows she's responsible for her choices, but for months she felt like there was this feeling inside of her she couldn't get rid of, and she went further down the path of substance abuse to drown out that feeling. She said she was rapidly declining and he wasn't in her dreams anymore, but she could feel his presence growing every day. He started communicating telepathically in her brain, and his thoughts started taking over her own. She eventually started SHing, trying to get something out of her body that she felt was inside of it. Parents ended up having her committed to a mental institution because they knew something wasn't right with her. After getting settled, she was alone in her hospital room one night sitting on the bed when she heard a knock at the door. He walked in. She said when he walked in, she felt this huge weight of sadness being lifted off of her. He closed the door behind him and he said, how do you feel? And she says, bad. And he says, if you admit you were wrong, I will stop. And she says, I know you're not real. He looked at her and then he said, okay. And he walked out the door and closed it behind him. And she said as soon as he left, she felt the weight of sadness return. After a week, she was released from the hospital on new medications to help with depression and anxiety. But things got worse. She was drinking every day. She was abusing substances. And she said she felt the weight of him growing before she experienced complete delusion and psychosis. She thought upon returning from the hospital that her entire family had been replaced by different people. She thought she was living in dreams and nothing she did or said mattered. She thought the government was following her. She believed that she had special powers, being able to smell and see things that weren't there. She's back in and out of the hospital 2 more times. The 3rd time she's there, he returns. He walks in the room and he says, you are hurting the people that you love. You're a bad person. And do you know what bad people deserve? They deserve to be unalived. You should go to the bridge and you should jump off. Somehow she leaves the hospital. She said it wasn't her though. She was being controlled. It was like her feet were forcing themselves forward as she walks toward the bridge. She said he had gained complete control of her body. She was walking toward the bridge when a big deer ran past her. Seeing the deer triggered a flight or fight response of sorts, and she snapped out of her trance. She was able to get a hold of her mom, who came to pick her up and took her to the hospital. After that, she was able to get proper medication. And as of now, she said she's sober and mostly happy. She is SH free, and she doesn't see him anymore in her waking life, but he still visits her in her dreams, and he is angry at her. She says she knows that he is real to her, and that he knows that he's real, and that he is trying to burn her happiness. All of that said, she can tell the difference now when it's him versus when it's her. She knows when he's inside of her. And she says she wants to smooth things over with him, but she doesn't know how. She ended her email by saying, am I crazy for thinking this is some type of entity, or is it really just my mental illness? Now you guys remember, her name has been changed, but she will be seeing the comments. Be kind. If you can't offer words of support or anything helpful, just say nothing. If you have a spooky scary story time, I would love to read it. I try to update this almost every single day. What'd y'all think? What was your favorite story? Later this week, I'm going to probably drop another episode. I've been really thinking about doing an alien or UAP episode just because of all the stuff going on with 3-Eye Atlas right now, which I've been researching on my own, but to be fully transparent, don't completely understand or have enough information to even determine what I think it is. So let me know what you think about that as well. And keep sending me your spooky scary stories. If you want to support the Spooky Scary Story mission, you can do that through Patreon. My Patreon is patreon.com/ashleeinc. For as little as $3 a month, you can help me tell as many stories as possible. Thank you to everyone already who has supported me, and thank you to everyone who just supports me by listening. It truly is making the biggest difference in my life, letting me bring you more stories, and I appreciate you guys so much. So until next time, stay spooky.